Hey guys, it's Jenny with Becoming Homesteaders. I have lots of things I will be canning up this week. I have some plums, some pears, some tomatoes. So come along with me and see how I am preserving these items to put on our pantry shelf for the winter. Okay, so today we are canning up some plum sauce. This is a spiced plum sauce, and my intention is to make pastries with this. A flaky croissant pastry with the plum sauce for Christmas. So we'll see. That's my plan. I don't know if you guys have ever tried the Starbucks pastries, but they're really good. So I'm hoping to mimic that with this plum sauce. We shall see. We have this was a whole peck of plums that we purchased. And this recipe, since I've never made it before, I'm just making one batch of it. It calls for 8 cups of diced plums. We'll see. I've always wanted to try this spiced plum jam. These were not intended to purchase. We went to this farm or this orchard with the intention of buying peaches. I called, they had peaches, but when we arrived, they had sold the last 2 bushels of peaches. So I'm so sad and disappointed. We have no peaches this year, first time in a long time, but we do have plums. So I'm going to try this spiced plum jam. I did find this recipe on Pinterest, but I did alter it a little bit. It does call for pectin, and it also had a couple spices that I did not include. I will put up the exact recipe that I used on my blog if you're interested, becominghomesteaders.com. But I did not use any pectin, and this set up so nice, you guys. I was so impressed. So if you're wanting to try a different kind of jam this season, you have plums or you're going to be getting plums, I definitely recommend trying this. It's not too spicy, but it has a little bit of a Christmassy taste to it. So I'm excited to make this pastry. I'll let you guys know how that turns out. Going on in the kitchen tonight, making some salsa, getting ready to do pears. Salsa's over there, cooling. I have my KitchenAid on, kneading some bread. So we're making a simple syrup right now to can my pears in. This simple syrup recipe I simply found in my Ball's Complete Book of Canning. It is a very light or extra light syrup, and I usually make this in my tea kettle here. It just makes it easy when you're pouring them into the jars then. And then I just give it a quick stir, and I keep it continually cooking on the stove or staying warm on the stove. Some lovely hoagie buns tomorrow for some sausage sandwiches. So I'm going to let this sourdough ferment till tomorrow morning. In my nice warm kitchen. We ended up with quite a few pears, and we were lucky enough to find a church here in the city that we live in that had these beautiful pear trees on the property, and they were not using them. So we asked if they would mind if we picked some pears, and they were very gracious and offered us to pick as many as we would like. So we ended up getting all of these pears for free. We did take back a jar of the canned pears to them to share and to show them what we did with the pears, but they were not all perfect. Obviously, they look kind of ugly, but once I peeled them, they were perfectly fine for canning. I did have to throw some of them away because They had sat too long on the ground and some of them were rotten, which was fine. They were free, so really can't complain, but very blessed to have these on the pantry shelf. I don't show a lot of the actual canning, but I simply just got my simple syrup ready, sliced the pears. I used my little measuring spoon set to scoop out the seed in the middle, and it makes a nice little round hole like you would find in the pears from the store. But I then sliced them, added them to the jars. They were hot in my canner, poured the hot liquid over, and left them sit in the jar until I had processed all 15 jars. And then I smashed them down a little bit to see if I could get a couple more pears in each jar. And after they sit in this hot liquid, they kind of soften up a bit and you are able to get more pears in the jar. I then, of course, wipe the rims, add my lid and the rings, lower them into the canner, and I processed them for 25 minutes because they were quarts. If you're doing pints, then it would be 20 minutes. This was such a busy week here. We did plums, we did pears, we were gifted a bunch of Roma tomatoes. So I decided to try a new recipe. We have a lot of salsa, but I didn't really know what else to do with tomatoes. We've definitely had our share of tomatoes this year. We made barbecue sauce, we did ketchup. I have already made a couple batches of salsa, but this is a cilantro lime salsa that I am trying. It is in my new book that I purchased, America's Test Kitchen, the Foolproof Preserving and Canning book. I'll link that book below for you, but this seems like just a very fresh salsa, so I'm just making one batch, and I have tried something new this year. I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. This was a game changer. I am slicing the tomatoes here in half, and I am placing them in my baking dishes, and I roast them at 400 degrees for about 45 minutes or until they're blistered on the top. The skins slip off so easily. And in the process of roasting, there is a lot of juice released from these tomatoes. So I feel like this saves so much time in the cooking process, because for salsas and ketchup and sauces, barbecue sauce, you want that nice thick consistency, and you have to cook your tomatoes quite a while to get that liquid to evaporate off. This definitely saves a lot of time, and it is time consuming, but I think it is well worth it. What I usually do, I put them all in these trays. I roast them all in my oven, and then I let them cool and slip the skins off, and I process them then the next day. Or I'll even let them cool overnight in these dishes and then slip the skins off and finish my recipe the very next day, so it doesn't completely drain you. But I definitely recommend trying the roasting in the oven first. All right, it's a new day. Day 2, I did all of the tomatoes last night and some pears and my bread. So I have my buns, well, they're looking pretty good here, rising for the second rise. My tomatoes are in here. They are all, the skins I've taken off, so they're ready to puree. Getting ready to, thus the gloves, chop up some hot peppers and roast in the oven with onions and garlic to finish out this salsa. I'm not making a giant batch because we have a ton of salsa left over from last year, but this is a new recipe out of my new book. So I will link the book below and I'll let you know if I like the recipe. Okay, I have all of the ingredients I need for the salsa sliced up and ready to go into a 400-degree oven until the tops are charred a little bit. But these are all homegrown veggies. We have some poblanos, some jalapenos, my Patterson onions, and my garlic. So garlic didn't do so good this year, but I did get a few heads to use up, but they will be gone very soon. This recipe was a little bit different in that it did have you roast the tomatoes in the oven, but then it says to leave the charred skin on the tomatoes to give the salsa that fire roasted taste. But I'm not a big fan of the tomato skins being left on. I did leave some of these skins on my vegetables that were charred, so I felt like that was adequate enough for the charred flavor for me. So I did remove all of the skins off of the tomatoes, which was a little bit different. And then I also ran some of the tomatoes through a food mill just because I don't like all of the seeds. I did leave some of the seeds in, but about half of my tomato mixture I did process through the food mill. It just made it a little bit smoother. I also used the food processor. I put the tomatoes in there, processed them, and then added them back to the pot. It made a nice, creamy, thick salsa, which is what I was going for. And I felt like the peppers and onions would give it that chunky texture that we like. So I think it turned out really good. You can either follow the exact recipe in the book or you can tweak it. You don't ever want to eliminate any of your acids that you're adding because then you risk the product spoiling. So like if it's calling for lemon juice or vinegar, in this case, it was lime juice, which I really loved the flavor of the lime juice. You don't want to alter those. When making any recipe that calls for lemon juice or lime juice, you do want to make sure that it is bottled and purchased lemon or lime juice because of the acidity level, as well as your vinegars. You want to make sure that you have that acidity level accurate, or again, you risk the product spoiling. So you definitely want to be mindful of that. Don't use fresh squeezed lemon juice or lime juice. I definitely did not add enough jalapeno peppers. I'm always afraid to get my salsas too hot. I need to add more jalapenos to my recipes and not be shy with that. It still tastes okay, but I feel like I'll be needing to add some hot sauce to each jar when I open it. But this was a very fresh recipe. It had the jalapenos. I added the poblanos to it. That lime juice was really nice. Then you also add some fresh cilantro to it, which I also love that in my salsa. So I do think this will be one that I will make again. And I might even prefer this one over my original salsa recipe. I'm not real sure. We'll have to see how fast each one goes off of our pantry shelf. But this will be a nice addition. It's nice and thick. So it does have a much thicker consistency. And I really attribute that to roasting those tomatoes in the oven prior to making the salsa. I like it, but I don't think I added enough heat. I like to heat my water bath canner up with water and add my jars that I'm going to be using in the water as it's warming. That way the jars warm up with the water. You always want to add your hot liquid to hot jars so you don't break them. And then just make sure that you leave enough headspace according to your recipe. Wipe your rims off with the distilled vinegar. That just helps to get any residue off and ensures a good seal. Center your lids on, screw your bands on, and lower them into the water bath canner. This recipe called for processing them for 25 minutes. So they were pint jars and I ended up processing them for 25 minutes. You want to make sure your water covers your jars completely. And then after the 25 minutes, I simply turn the canner off and I leave it sit with the lid on for another 5 minutes. And then you can remove those jars to your countertop and leave them sit for 24 hours. I did end up with more tomatoes than the recipe called for, so I thought I would make a small batch of pizza sauce. So that's what I did. I ended up with like 3 little 8-ounce jars, but I thought since I'm water bath canning this salsa, I might as well make some sauce and go ahead and throw that in. So this was just a recipe that I found online. It is a fresh basil tomato pizza sauce. Not a huge fan of it, so I probably won't be making this again, but we'll definitely use it for either dipping breadsticks in, or I will top a pizza with it and put all of those pizza toppings on it. So it will get used, but I probably won't make this next year. Sourdough hamburger and hot dog buns turned out beautiful. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it, and I hope y'all are staying motivated. It is the end of the season, so we do tend to get tired this time of year, but stay motivated. I hope your gardens are doing well. I hope you're harvesting a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.